Welcome to Who's in STEM. I'm Ken Ono, your host and the STEM advisor to the Provost and the Marvin Rosenblum Professor of Mathematics at UVA. Our goal is to evoke flights of imagination and wonder by showcasing the cornucopia of all that is STEM at UVA, the marvelous world of UVA science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Now, it's summer, and a few weeks ago, we celebrated our final exercises with thousands of UVA grads joyfully walking the lawn to receive their diplomas. But make no mistake, work goes on at UVA 24/7 year-round, and I definitely don't want to forget the amazing work that's happening, a lot of it which is behind the scenes. But also, a lot of this recent work is completely visible for all to see. Indeed, locals surely have noticed and likely heard the construction occurring at Fontaine Medical Research Park, located south of grounds. When I say heard, I actually had a doctor's appointment many months ago, and they were blasting with dynamite. And it's so exciting to see this building sprout up from what was formerly just a plan. And so today I want to celebrate this. We're excited to talk about one of the most ambitious projects ever undertaken by the University of Virginia. And I'm talking about the Paul and Diane Manning Institute for Biotechnology that aims to develop innovative patient therapies through groundbreaking research. And it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Mark Esser, the Manning Institute's founding chief scientific officer, and he's here to tell us all about what's going on with the Institute. Mark, welcome to Who's in STEM.
Well, thank you very much, Ken, and thrilled to be here for this podcast, and even more thrilled and excited to be back at UVA. Backstory was here 28 years ago and love to share some stories there, but no, just thrilled to be here with you and the team and talk about this exciting venture called the Manning Institute.
Yeah. Welcome back to UVA. Things must have changed, right?
Just a tad.
Just a little bit. Right? There are a lot of things I want to talk about, but this institute is a big thing, so no beating around the bush. Tell us about the institute.
I think the institute is really going to be an amazing opportunity to transform science into medicines. And if for folks that are listening, if you only take one thing away from this talk, and that's the mission of transforming the groundbreaking science going on here at UVA into medicines. One of the things I like to say is a molecule is not a medicine, and there's a lot of work that goes into making a medicine, and that will really be the mission of the Institute. So I kind of like to say we're going to do three things. We're going to accelerate, educate, and innovate. Accelerate that transformation of that science into medicines with a real focus on the translational work that goes on behind the scenes to do that. I'd love to unpack that with you. Educate, of course, it's the mission of the university to train up the next generation of scientists, physicians, and entrepreneurs to take that exciting science and turn it into the companies and the medicines that will one day help people. And then the last one, I think, is going to be a lot of fun, and that's innovate. Drug discovery and drug development's incredibly complex. And I think we're going to use the Institute as a bit of a test bed to kind of reimagine and reinvigorate some different approaches to drug discovery. Maybe talk a little bit about how we'll use AI in drug discovery in a little bit.
Are there some key areas that you're going to focus on as you launch the Institute?
Kind of my first 30 days on the job, I've kind of been going on a listening tour, talking to as many folks as I can, from grad students to postdocs to, of course, the scientists and physicians, the professors, but also folks in the business school and facilities management, kind of asking three key questions. You know, what are we passionate about at UVA in terms of biomedical research? Where can we be the best? And how are we going to make it happen in terms of resources? And kind of the three or four things that have really risen to the top, and I think it's quite evident when you just walk around, is UVA is incredibly strong in neuroscience. The Brain Institute has been a major investment. Some of the researchers and physicians, I think you may have spoken with John Lukens earlier on this show, a really brilliant neuroscientist. Neuroscience is going to be a key, and I think most people know that some of the most debilitating diseases, from Alzheimer's, Parkinson's to glioblastoma, UVA is incredibly strong there. Tom Loughran and the team in the Cancer Center, it's an NCI-designated cancer center. It means it's one of the best in the country, is incredibly strong, and we'll double down on the science and the medicine to hopefully develop some cures and run clinical trials here at UVA. And then immunology, kind of as the third maybe leg of that stool, which kind of crosses all those areas but is a field unto itself. And you could think of everything from allergy to autoimmunity, and then really engaging the immune system to do things like attack cancer and destroy it.
It's funny, you are right. We had the pleasure of having John Lukens on. Not only is he a brilliant scientist, he's really kind of a charismatic dynamo all on his own. But circling back to the Brain Institute, on one of our early episodes, we featured Sarah Kasinis and Jaideep Kapoor and talked about the great work they are doing, leveraging some of our grand challenge funds as a 5X, 10X kind of entity to really grow research in these fields. And what I like about it is in our neuroscience portfolio, the Brain Institute and allied departments, you have researchers like Sarah who's thinking about brain development in zebrafish, all the way up to those researchers who are thinking about, I'm in phase 3 drug trials, right? And so I guess what we see in you in launching the Manning Institute is a new level of professionalism. And I think that's great. Can you tell us about Paul and Diane Manning? I think they certainly deserve a huge shout out.
What a wonderful couple. What tremendous benefactors to the university. Of course, none of this would be possible without this extremely generous gift that Paul and Diane made to get this institute, both literally and figuratively out of the ground. So incredibly grateful, incredibly honored to have this role. But if I was to describe Paul, I would say he is a force of nature. He puts his mind to something, it gets done. And having him kind of as our backer means the sky's the limit. It's going to be a ton of fun.
So, Mark, now that you've been here for a few weeks, you've met with many of UVA's leaders, of course, Jim Ryan, but others that you'll be working with, just so that our listeners can get a sense of how broad UVA medicine, UVA research and biology and biomedical research is. Tell us about who you'll be working with.
Yeah, no, it's been a ton of fun. I've probably, literally met with more than 75 folks over the course of a month. Everyone from grad students to the deans to the department chairs to the center heads. Everyone's been super welcoming and great to work with. But a few folks to call out. Obviously, Dean Kibbe Molina of the medical school has been just a great partner and a resource. Of course, Lori McMahon overseeing all research here at the university. And then just a special thanks to Mitch Rosner, who's serving as the interim head of UVA Health, and then, of course, Bree Gertler, who's serving as the interim provost. Both have been really great resources, helping me get up and running. I got my 90-day plan, 30 down, charging ahead.
So I opened our discussion by talking about how this is a super ambitious, perhaps one of the most ambitious projects that UVA has ever launched. But those are my words. From your perspective, how will the Institute fit in with the larger universe of all things health and science related at the university?
We often, in kind of my world, when we think about biotechnology and biomedical research and drug development, we talk about the ecosystem and sort of the drug development ecosystem. And another way of saying what I like to say is developing medicines is very much a team sport. No one person can be the master of any given field that's required to be that, that subject matter expert on things as distinct, as you said, basic biology to clinical medicine. Obviously, these things need to be designed and manufactured. You need the regulatory expertise.
And then the trials and the patients.
And the clinical trialists and the nurses and the partnerships with the foundations. And in addition to saying it's a team sport, I always like to say it's a contact sport. Sometimes you're banging heads with folks, and that can be healthy to have those rigorous debates. But more importantly, it's about being better together and working together. And I really see that as one of the major missions of the Institute, is to be able to take these cross-functional disciplines, these experts from these distinct fields, and literally bring them together under one roof. Now, we'll have to do that virtually first until the building comes to fruition, but both literally and figuratively to bring people together under one roof, get the best minds possible working together to solve some of these, really serious unmet medical needs.
Yeah, so I'd like to dig just a little bit deeper here with that for our listeners. The university leaders that you will be working with, of course, include President Ryan, but probably also include Melina Kibbe, the Dean of the School of Medicine. And could you add some color to what that will look like?
Yeah, no, it's really kind of being on the ground here for these 30 days, realize probably at minimum we'll have 6 different schools literally in the building working together. Of course, folks from the School of Medicine is kind of obvious. We'll have folks from the School of Engineering, School of Data Science, of course, arts and sciences with the chemists and the biologists. I'm going to need a couple of folks from the Darden School, hopefully, to come on over.
You always need a lawyer.
Have the business guys, and last but not least, we're going to need a couple of lawyers. And there's many flavors of lawyers, but my favorite lawyers are the intellectual property lawyers.
Yeah.
Because that's really the magic in these and the science that when you have that idea, and for anyone listening, if you have a great idea, please patent it, because that's really the value that the Institute is going to generate.
Right. We recently hired Rich Chilla from Michigan State, who is heading up our licensing and ventures. And he is so excited to have you join UVA because, as you say, patents, new ideas, and we want to make Rich busy. What this all speaks to is that University of Virginia, as an institution, is really changing and meeting the needs of the new world, right? 28 years ago, when you were studying for your graduate degree, your PhD, it was probably close to the truth that most folks thought of UVA as Thomas Jefferson's University, the lawn, the rotunda. And here we are today, 28 years later, talking about a brand new institute, not to mention the Brain Institute and schools like the School of Data Science. The University of Virginia has responded to the new world in which we live. And so I think hats off to Jim Ryan. He has spearheaded a lot of this, and here we are.
Yeah, no, I definitely echo that, Ken. I think Jim is truly a visionary. I studied the 2030 plan in great detail, and I think he has a really profound vision of the future and where things are going. And one of the things, that's I think very different today than 28 years ago is the number of different paths people take after leaving academia. I obviously took my own path, but there's also, I believe, an expectation on universities today to really be contributing to the economic development of their locales. And, one of the other parts of the Manning Institute is really to serve as that catalyst to really help ignite some of the life sciences sector here in Virginia. I was just kind of reviewing my notes, and life sciences in biomedical research is one of the largest industries in the United States. It's close to $600 billion. About 8 of that's actually done in Virginia, so a small proportion. And when you look at all the ingredients in Virginia, I mean, the talent base with some of these young, incredibly bright, motivated students, not just here at UVA, but at Tech and VCU and JMU, really a rich base of young talent. And you really have the economic ingredients to help kind of fuel this life science sector in Virginia. So that is actually also one of the missions of the Institute, is to kind of serve as that nexus to help spring some of these companies and serve as a source for companies to come and collaborate with people at UVA.
And all in benevolence, right? This is all part of Jim's plan to be both great and good. These aren't just words. I think many of the listeners will have close family members and friends who struggle with diabetes, right? It's not an uncommon condition. In my family, we have a diabetic, and you probably know where I'm going with this. I'm talking about the Dexcom device, a glucose monitor that is integrated with an insulin pump. This has dramatically changed her life. And she's been living with diabetes, and she's into her 80s. So that says something. And we should all be proud that the bulk of the technology in that device came out of the University of Virginia through the work of Mark Breton and Boris Kovachev here as a partnership between engineering and the School of Medicine. And if I remember from my notes earlier this year, I think something like 600,000 or 700,000 Americans take advantage of this technology that was invented here. And by the way, the Mannings played a critical role in funding that work. So the work that you will be doing will really impact not just the university and the citizens of the Commonwealth of Virginia, but the world. And I think that's really great.
It gets me jazzed to get out of bed every morning, knowing that we have the opportunity to do that. And actually, I met Boris on day 2.
He's a funny guy.
Yeah, I mean, and what an inspiration. And he is kind of the poster child of what I would love to see coming out of the Manning Institute. These really creative, driven, passionate scientists, engineers working together to come up with a solution to transform people's lives. Like, I would love to have a dozen more Borises come out of UVA. That would be wonderful.
So, Mark, you get up every morning, you're going to work, but the building isn't finished. So, yeah, let's talk about that. When you get up, do you put the hard hat on and scope out the site? Tell us what's going on in the space.
A big shout out to Michelle and Ted and the team out at Fontaine that are working around the clock with the Skanska team. I mean, they're all in. They're dedicated, and they feel like they're part of the mission. So Fridays, I put the hard hat on. I spend my Fridays over at Fontaine, which is really cool. Got to walk down in the pit and seeing it coming out of the ground. Already talking about the top-off party where the last piece of steel should be going up in hopefully October. But to your point, we're building the Manning Institute, and the Manning Institute is going to be more than just a building, right? It's going to be obviously the building per se, but it's going to be an institute without walls. And it's really about collaboration, like we discussed, and bringing people together with a common mission to kind of transform science into medicines working collaboratively. So over the next 2 years, starting to build the plans of what do those teams look like? What does that infrastructure look like? What are those capabilities that we're going to need that we don't have today? What are those gaps that we're going to need to fill? Probably some medicinal chemists, some biologics engineers, some clinical pharmacologists focusing on things like drug metabolism and pharmacokinetics. And then some of the process behind how do you take an idea and actually matriculate it and evolve it into what can someday become a medicine. And that's the exciting part, but the reality is about 1 in 300 molecules actually make it to the finish line. And putting the rigors in place, the steps that if we're going to fail, we're going to fail fast. And then we can retool and start on the next big idea. So putting some of that virtual infrastructure in place is something I've been kind of keeps me up at night already. And then obviously pouring over the blueprints, thinking how do we make the physical building really ideal for enhancing collaboration.
So how many members have you already hired on your staff?
One, me.
Yeah, okay.
So N of 1, starting some of the recruiting process, laying out some of the job descriptions, kind of a hiring plan. I think before I got too far along that path, wanted to put together an advisory committee to help advise, not just in hiring, but on the strategic direction of the Institute. And sort of having 2 boards, if you will. One is having an external advisory board. This is pretty traditional in companies and sort of big institutes. These are leaders, luminaries in the field that can help guide and direct from an external perspective. But I think equally important is assembling some of the, hopefully the deans, the department heads, center heads that can serve on an internal advisory board before we really get started.
Mark, I think it's really important that we recognize that it's kind of a sobering moment in higher education and research. Federal funding for research is at risk. The proposed federal budget calls for significant cuts to R&D spending. And every morning, maybe almost every hour, there are worrisome headlines about substantial cuts to NIH or NSF, so on and so forth. Now, this obviously poses a significant challenge to all of us, but in particular for you, launching an institute. So what can you tell us about how you're addressing this very complicated and uncertain environment?
Yeah, so a little bit out of the frying pan and into the fire, coming from my last job, which was at a pharmaceutical company. Similar but different things were happening. Philosophically, having really kind of come of age leading some teams during COVID, there was a talk I would give because it was a challenging time. And so the world is going to change. We're not going to stop that. But how do we use it sort of philosophically as an opportunity to rethink how we do research, working together, how we fund it, and frankly, where those sources of funding come from? Because as you said, Ken, we know traditional NIH, NSF funding's at risk. I think this is a great moment just to give a shout out to the Mannings and other philanthropists that have donated significant amounts of money to the Institute. UVA has an incredibly loyal alumni base, and many have reached out to me personally asking how they can get involved. And what an opportunity and what a privilege. Additional sources of funding too. The venture capital community, I like to say they have more money than good ideas. And they're also very excited about funding potential work at the Manning Institute, in addition to large pharmaceutical companies that have reached out to me and asked how they could fund research here. I'm coming in a little bit fresh, and I don't want to minimize the challenges in front of us, but I think it does give us an opportunity to think creatively and kind of reinvent how we approach funding some of this type of science.
As a mathematician myself, I have relied in my career on primarily funding from the National Science Foundation. And so the last few months have been traumatic, to say the least. But as you say, out of every crisis, out of every challenge, there might be an opportunity. And in my field, and maybe every field, honestly, but certainly in my field, what came as an unexpected opportunity are these challenges, the support that the AI labs, who are quite wealthy these days, and their genuine interest in science. So in the last few months alone, I've become aware of Amazon launching a research grant program. Meta has done this as well. I spoke at a conference at Meta a couple of weeks ago about scientific discovery in AI. And then don't forget Google DeepMind and OpenAI. I just think that funding for science is evolving. And as you say, as long as we are open to these new partnerships, then maybe the opportunity turns out to be ours.
Yeah. I'll kind of share a personal example. Even coming from a large pharmaceutical company that was literally spending billions, even there I would put grant proposals together and work with folks. And one my team had put together was with Lawrence Livermore Labs out in California. And so if people who'd seen Oppenheimer, remember Lawrence?
Physics.
It's a big physics institute.
Right.
And I'm like, what's an immunologist, biologist doing with physics? Well, first of all, the lines are becoming blurred. And a lot of these physicists had been deployed to use these powerful supercomputers, machine learning, to redesign special proteins called antibodies. And maybe you guys remember from your freshman biology, the antibodies are those proteins in our blood that target pathogens. And having worked on COVID, we were always faced with the challenge of potency versus breadth. And see if you guys can track with me, but they're usually competing principles. The more specific a medicine is or a drug, usually the more potent it is, but then it's not broadly reactive. Where the more broadly reactive an antibody is, usually the less potent it is. And again, these are sort of competing principles. So, through actually, I think it was a Department of Defense funded program, the Livermore guys were like, well, we think we can solve for both. We can take some of these antibodies that were ultra potent, but then got knocked out by the Omicron variant, and remember all the different variants, and we can make them more broadly reactive but equally potent. And I said, will never work, can't be done, but go at it. And so we gave them all the access to our data at AstraZeneca. And about 3 weeks later, they came back with some in silico designs, and we made them and tested them, and lo and behold, they were just as potent and neutralized every single strain of the virus. So not a traditional drug discovery and development program, and it was through kind of an additional source of funding. And I just use it as one of these creative examples and, encouraging folks to think creatively how to do things differently because things are changing.
Yeah. So it's important to build on this. I've been thinking about AI quite a bit in my role as STEM advisor, but more recently in my research. And the models that I have access to through OpenAI and Google they are just so smart. And we have to be thinking about how the AI tools, the large language models, the incredible ability to run simulations will transform science. And I suspect what the folks at Lawrence Livermore did for you is very much along the lines of finding new openings to chess or finding new openings to games like Go that people have been playing for centuries. And you wouldn't think that there would be a new opening to one of these games that would defeat what humans had ever done before. But please don't assume that, because you would be wrong. So Mark, earlier I mentioned that you're returning to UVA, and I think we've talked quite a bit about the Institute and your plans, but I would be remiss if we didn't have an opportunity to chat about you. You're the designated leader, the founding chief scientific officer of the Institute. Tell us, what was your path? How did you get here?
I often am asked to give talks, with grad students and postdocs when I speak at universities. And I think there's always this expectation that I had this grand plan when I was 25, and I've been slowly playing it out over the last almost 3 decades. But that's not the case. I came out of grad school with a passion for immunology. I came of age as an immunologist during the AIDS crisis. When I first started, AIDS was literally a death sentence. HIV infection was. Today, it's a completely manageable disease, but really became fascinated with cells of the immune system called T cells, which both attack the virus and are actually the target of the HIV virus, and went up to the AIDS vaccine program at the NIH to do my fellowship, and made some pretty important discoveries, and then decided, to really work on this, I wanted to go to a company. And at the time, Merck Research Labs was really considered the leader in both developing antivirals and a vaccine for HIV. And they recruited me, and I joined and was working there just a few short months when, and this is kind of how it works in industry, the head came in and said, we appreciate what you're doing, but we have this other project over here with a vaccine targeting human papillomavirus. Very early days, and we're going to take you off the HIV programs and put you on this. And it's kind of Friday, you get the word, Monday you're on a new project, and that actually became Gardasil. Became one of the scientists to help develop that, which is really an amazing medicine, more than 99% effective in preventing both cervical and head and neck cancers caused by HPV. It was kind of a full circle moment when I saw my daughter get vaccinated a few years after we had launched it. And so that was really a seminal moment. Did some other things, took twists and turns and ups and downs as any career goes, and then had been keeping my eye on a little biotech company in Gaithersburg, Maryland called MedImmune. And they were either brave enough or foolish enough to be one of the last companies working on something called respiratory syncytial virus, which is a devastating infection in newborn infants, can be deadly. And neonatal intensive care units and pediatric intensive care units fill up every winter due to RSV. And
yeah, you hear about it from the daycare center.
Yeah, the daycare center will send out an alert.
Yeah.
And, they called me, and I said, I felt a calling to do it, and, picked up the family and joined this kind of biotech company that was on its way up. I used to tell people it was a lot of fun. It was like being a teenager with dad's credit card. And we kind of went for it. And then that was really a labor of love, and just, super proud to report in 2023 we got a medicine called nirsevimab, or Beyfortus, approved. It was actually a unanimous vote from the FDA because it was so efficacious and so safe. And really a heartening moment when my granddaughter got immunized, or got a dose last fall. And, we were getting reports that some hospitals will be closing down parts of their PICUs and NICUs because there were no RSV cases last year. And actually, the president of Chile said that it was the first year ever no children had died. Quite touching.
I can't imagine.
Yeah. It makes it personal, and I do take it personally. And
did you go into immunology because maybe in your youth there was a family member that came down with something that you wanted?
I think everyone has a story, and it was one that took me some years to come to peace with, but, kind of sitting with some young folks. I think everybody has their why, because my father died of cancer when I was young. That drove me to do it. My middle son's dealing with cancer.
Right.
So, he's got his year checkup coming in about 2 weeks.
Fingers crossed for that.
Yeah. So, I was kind of a science kid, wanted to be in science, and, thought I was going to be like an astronaut or an engineer or something. But, really, I think that moment, I decided, well, this was kind of when genetic engineering was kind of making the news. I had a subscription to Scientific American and stuff, and I'm like, well, what's this interleukin-2 and what's the immune system? And so I got kind of excited about it, but always with like, well, how could we, deploy it to cure and tackle disease? So, and when I got to UVA, I did a tour in one of the immunology labs.
So this would have been early 90s or mid-90s?
Yeah, 92, 93. And they'd really just, a few years earlier discovered these T cells called cytolytic T lymphocytes, or killer T cells. And they were discovering, Tom and Vivian Bracciali, who started the Carter Center, had discovered sort of the mechanism that these T cells use to kill virally infected cells. And I was like, wow, could we engineer these or deploy them to actually kill, not just infections, but cancers? And in fact, there's medicines approved today that do just that. So it's pretty cool.
It is remarkable. It made this a good idea to talk about why fundamental and translational support for science is so important, these human stories. When you live in the moment, it's easy to forget how far we've come. I'm 57 now. I'm a little bit older than you. But I remember when scientists in the 80s became almost like rock stars for the first time because of major breakthroughs in genetics. So I remember David Ho. He made the cover of Time magazine, and I thought it should be like Madonna, but no. Then Francis Collins, David Baltimore, these people who we all benefit from. And then and it's not just one area of medical research. I mean, you look left, you look right, you go to the doctor. You're probably taking advantage of some major advance that was not available to us 20, 30 years ago. The mapping out the human genome, that's something that allows us to even talk about precision medicine that is geared to make you, the individual, healthier based on the factors that we test. That was not possible. Speaking of cancer, my wife, she sort of hit the lottery twice. She had a double mastectomy, breast cancer, now in remission for well over 10 years. And she also had a brain tumor. She had not a glioblastoma, but she had a meningioma, but in an area that should have been inoperable. But at the time, we were very lucky, and there was a professor who had just developed this new procedure. They do that kind of thing here at the University of Virginia. And 2 weeks later, she's able to talk again, and she has a completely normal life. You would never know. But if we'd lived in the 50s, either one of those would have probably been all she wrote. So this is why the university supports and is staunchly underwriting research in medicine and the Brain Institute, and now ultimately the Manning Institute. So Mark, thank you for sharing the path from UVA to NIH and then Merck and so on, ultimately to AstraZeneca. Obviously, you're more than qualified for this job. But as a professor, I kind of want to ask, you're transitioning from industry to the University of Virginia. What's that like? I think I understand a little bit better what it's like to go from academia to industry. It seems like you're stemming the tide. You're like the salmon going upstream. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and maybe even kind of like, I think the number one question I get is, well, why? Why did you, choose to leave? AstraZeneca was doing great, an amazing team, working on some really important medicines that will hopefully someday help patients. There's really a couple reasons. One, this is truly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. How many times do you get a chance to build an institute from scratch, help develop the mission, the vision, the culture? That's a lot of fun. And it's a challenge, and I love a big challenge. Realistically, if it was anywhere but University of Virginia, I wouldn't have entertained it. just incredibly fond memories of being here, and in a small way, hopefully a chance to give back to the university that really gave me a rigorous education that served me well. And then lastly, it turned out along the way that my daughter, her husband, and now her granddaughter actually moved to the general area. So it's kind of the icing on the top of the cake to be a little closer to my daughter and her family. So I don't think I could say no. Yeah. But in terms of what's different, actually, I'd say surprised that there's more similarities than differences, actually. I think some of the challenges are the same. The fundamental science that underpins everything, of course, is the same. I think the big difference is, by design, universities are decentralized organizations. It's a mix of individuals with their own ideas, their own research paths, the ability to follow their kind of instincts and be creative. And that's by design, and that's where innovation occurs. A large organization, like a large pharmaceutical company, by design, is really a top-down driven organization.
Yeah, there's a CEO, and
there's annual
there's
goals,
and
there's a cadence to the reporting and the business cycle, and you get 80,000 people aligned and marching in one direction. So I think it's going to be the challenge and the opportunity. How do you try to find the best of both worlds, where you can pull the most out of folks in terms of that individual creativity and innovation, and harness it in a way that's similar? Will be very different. It will never look like a drug development company, but create that infrastructure that if someone has the desire to move their molecule or their research towards a drug, that we put those systems in place, frankly, to make it easy. In that way, I see myself really wanting to take a customer service approach where the customers are going to be the professors. And I'm like, you have an idea. I want to make it easy for you to move that idea towards the clinic, both with funding and resources. But we'll see.
Yeah. Now, in this institute, will you have a lab?
It was very tempting. I have lots of my own ideas, but stepping back and looking at how big and complex the job is, I think to do it well and to really be a good steward with the resources and serve the research community, I think I'm better fit trying to be the administrator to create an environment where people can flourish.
It's like being a parent. You're proud of your kids, right?
I think it's a great analogy.
So, Mark, time is running short here. You had 3 parts to your mantra. There was accelerate. Help me.
The mission of the Institute's going to be transforming science into medicines, and we're going to do that by accelerating, educating, and innovating around the science.
So let's quickly talk about the educating, right? So as you plan the programming for the Institute, I'm sure you're thinking about how you can get UVA students from first years through graduate, postdoctoral involved. What message do you have for them in terms of what they can look out for as you launch your institute?
Yeah, well, early days, I think one thing that I always loved about being in the university, and I actually, when I became a VP at AZ, I instituted a seminar series. I think it's just such a wonderful way to share information and bring folks together. So, we'll be instituting the Manning Institute Seminar Series, or MISS. So don't miss MISS. We'll have seminars every other Wednesday, I think would be the goal, really with the focus of bringing in my friends from industry to give some of their stories of what it was like to really develop a medicine or have one fail, and kind of just share those stories and try to get people from, around all sort of angles of biopharmaceutical research just to come in and tell their stories and give a presentation.
So I feel like Mark, I think we've talked quite a bit about the job, the importance of science. Maybe a fun fact. Tell us something about yourself that you'd like to share here and now on the podcast.
So fun fact, I have a twin brother. Fraternally, we don't look anything alike. He's not a scientist, but good friends, and we love to play tennis when we can get together. I get my 4 kids out on the court here or there. They're more pickleball players. And so, that's kind of a fun fact, outside of work, which takes up a lot of time, and try to enjoy getting the kids together skiing, playing some pickleball. Another grad student and I won the doubles tournament for grad students way back when. So yeah,
that's great.
Still like to get out and play when I can.
Well, Mark, this has been a great conversation. Thank you for taking time to be with us today. The Manning Institute, it is a big deal, everyone. And it's not an exaggeration to say that the Manning Institute is an extraordinary opportunity for the university. I think we're in great and good hands with you. So welcome to UVA, and I'm Ken Ono, STEM advisor to the provost, and the Marvin Rosenblum Professor of Mathematics, and you've been listening to Who's in STEM.
Who's in STEM is a production of WTJU 91.1 FM and the Office of the Provost at the University of Virginia. Who's in STEM is produced by Catherine Kossaboom, Claire Curzon, Benjamin Larson, Mary Gardner-McGee, Katie Nichols, and Ria Verma. Our music is composed and performed by Robert Schneider and John Ferguson of Apples in Stereo. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Listen and subscribe to Who's in STEM on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back soon with another conversation about scientific and technological innovation at the university.